Vintage Star Wars stamps.
Kids love log.
'Tis the podcast log
Yes, log.
of the Star Wars Collector's Archive blog. Oh.
Yes, log.
Whenever the Star Wars Collector's Archive publishes a new blog, this podcast will log its contents, interview its writers, and go deeper. It's the Kivecast Blog Log Pod.
You, sir, are a mouthful.
Relax and just take life easy for a little while. Because it's only lasts for a little while.
No intros on a blog log podcast, Steve.
No, this is the 15th. That's all I'll say.
Nor editing, because I'll just leave in saying blog Steve. We're also not going to get too Gargan Largan, Steve. We are going to cut straight to the point. Now, this show has a long history. This has been a long time coming, Steve.
It has.
Do you know why it's been a long time coming?
I feel like it's been a long-running joke about you not knowing about the stamp collecting kit from 1978. I feel like that's come up time and time again over the years. So finally, we're going to address it head on.
Basically, every time I've seen Chris Jorgulius, he mentions to me that he can't believe that I didn't know that existed.
Right.
I mean, I'm not as young of a man as you are, Steve, but I am of the Jedi generation. So I wasn't around 1978. I was 1 year old. I wouldn't have seen it. I wasn't doing cute little drawings. You know, I was a zygote. I was hardly even born. So, So we're going to go into detail. How much detail, Steve?
More than you could possibly imagine.
So I've been thinking about Jonathan McElwain. So we're going to have Ron Salvatore on here. So really what we're going to be talking about is this article on the Harris stamp collecting kits from 1978, vintage item. And there's been a great blog log, a great blog post on the archive. And it's written by Jonathan McElwain and edited and sort of prefaced by Ron Salvatore. And so we're going to have both of them on here. And I was thinking we needed a nickname for Jonathan McElwain. Now, I used to call him the fake Canadian because his name just sounds too Canadian to me.
Yeah.
And his whole demeanor is, I mean, with the exception of a couple, most Canadians are famous for being nice. I think you know the exceptions I'm talking about. But he's such a nice and affable, smart guy. It's sort of the stereotype of a Canadian. So it never. He
just lacks the accent.
Yeah, but I'm thinking because whenever we have him on, we go into too much detail. So I was thinking about Johnny Too Much. What do you think of that?
I like where that starts. I think let's see how Jonathan takes it.
Because he's not a Johnny at all. That's incongruous as his American citizenship. And believe me, Steve, I have been looking up the etymology of the word citizen. So just hold on to your butts. If that sounds good to you, you're going to want to hear the other side of this little break here. So let's get on Johnny Too Much and Ron Salvatore to talk about the Harris Star Wars collecting stamps. All right, well, Steve, after some phone hijinks, we have them back here. And I did inform Jonathan that we now have a new nickname for him. Ron, we didn't run this by you, so you're not responsible for this. So Jonathan, you are somebody who we have on here. And do you know what role you fulfill for us?
No, I don't know.
Well, Ron's sort of the explainer. He's the disambiguator. You know what I mean? Like, when things need to be said right, that's when we need Ron on here. Yehuda is whatever the opposite of that is. And the obfuscator.
Dr. Obfuscator Kleinman.
Yes. But Jonathan, whenever we need someone to tell us too much about something, you're the person. So we're thinking of Johnny Too Much. How does that work for you?
That sounds fine.
Okay. So we're here with Ron and Johnny Too Much.
Sounds like a porn star name. You should totally change that.
So Johnny Too Much wrote a great article about Harris stamp collecting kits we said a little bit before we had you on that I've been teased mercilessly by a little bit by Ron, but mostly by Chris Jogoulias for not even knowing that these things existed. I guess before we sort of talk about it, did any of you actually collect these when you were a kid?
I collected stamps a little bit. Like my dad had a small collection that I sort of inherited, I guess, and I had, some stamps at the time, but I this thing was not on my radar screen at all.
I honestly don't think anybody who's actually ever lived ever collected this thing. Like, I've never heard of anybody having it or having memories of it, but it's amazing to me that you've never seen it, because if you've collected vintage stuff for any amount of time, you've seen unused examples at shows or whatever. Jonathan might have more info, but for whatever reason, there must have been a ton of overstock or something, because there's just been unused, sealed examples of this item that have been floating around the hobby forever, it seems like. And that's how I've known it. Like, I don't remember it as a kid. I just remember it as an adult collector, just seeing it places.
Yeah, I don't have any great intel or insight, but yeah, it's just one of those things it's just everywhere. And it's, when you adjust for inflation, it basically sells for the same thing as it did back in the day. It's completely flat.
Which is like the only vintage item you can say that of, probably, that's like sealed, untouched, and it still sells for the same price.
Well, it's a really funny thing, and this kind of goes to the intro that Ron gives, and that we're sort of headed towards. I think for our generation, I'm not speaking for Steve, because Steve technically hasn't been born yet, but like for our generation, like we were constantly being told to collect stamps, and that stamps were the things that, my grandparents gave me a bunch of stamps that I found recently. I remember looking at my friend Jonathan Machado. I went over to his house, and he had all these stamps, and we looked at it, and if they were from different countries and they had like a different currency, we thought that was how much the stamp was worth. So if there was a lot of inflation, we're like, oh my God, this is worth $1,000, but it was just 1,000 rupees or whatever.
Right.
But I mean, I really like, I don't know if you read this, Steve. Have you read Ron's little opening poetic musings on the nature of collecting?
That I have indeed, and I like that you finally. I don't know if I've seen you do this before, Ron, but you finally just acknowledged Star Wars is it's not stuff, it's not collectibles, it's Star Wars crap that retains its longevity somehow. But yeah,
basically it all comes down to crap after everybody stops caring about it. At that point, it's just crap.
But there's this line that you say where you said hobbies are trends expressed in material terms, and like trends, they thrive and wither in ways that are fairly predictable. And I just wanted to take a little second and say that's some really good writing, Ron, and I'm happy to kind of spend a little bit of time just reading it and sort of thinking about it.
Well, I probably should have said collectibles instead of hobbies, because hobbies is probably too broad. But yeah, I mean, I sort of feel that way. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but collectibles in general kind of, I mean, they go up and down depending on. It's like a generational thing, it seems to me, in a lot of ways, except for certain things, but most things are generational.
Yeah, and that's. I mean, I don't know if you guys pay attention to what's happening right now in the collectible market, but about 5 years ago, I was like, if I were smart, if I were like Yehuda, like he's always smart, he's always ahead of the game. If I were smart, I would just buy the most expensive Pokemon cards I could right now, because all those dumb idiots like Steve's age, they're all going to grow up and want Pokemon cards, so I should just do it. And I haven't been paying attention. The Pokemon card market has gone up like 10 times. Like whatever card you used to be able to buy for 5,000 is now 30,000. It's just like, don't check my math. It's absolutely exploded, and it's just much like you say. It's fairly predictable. And the thing I think that would be interesting to do is try to take Ron's little sentence here and figure nostalgia in there. Like how can we put nostalgia into this? Because these stamps are like our parents' generation thinking what we want based on their nostalgia.
Yeah.
Which is like the Black Series toys. Like, we think that these kids should care about action figures, but they don't. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Hasbro toys are stamps. Okay.
And that's the interesting thing. Like, people say Star Wars collecting is gonna. I mean, I don't know. I hate getting into market discussions because I just think it's like pointless. Nobody really knows, and I've never been able to predict all this stuff. But even if Star Wars, like as a license, and still has like relevance 20 years from now, and probably it will in some degree. Like, I don't know if action figures really will in the same way. I think that's really tied to what 60s through 90s people, and outside of that, kids today don't seem to care as much. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know anything about kids, so.
Yeah, well, so I think that's a nice and sobering way to get into this article. So Jonathan, you spent Johnny Too Much. You spent all this time, the fake Canadian. That's your other old nickname. You spent all this time making this nice article, and we've just explained why it's totally worthless. But it's why it's so valuable. It's why we like what you do so much. You really documented this really well. So explain to us.
This is a cool article, man. There's a bunch of stuff in here I never knew about, like sand citizens and all this other stuff. Like, I never knew any of this stuff, like, until I saw this. So this is pretty cool, I think.
Yeah. So tell us, Jonathan, a little bit about like who actually made this thing, because what is a stamp company? Like what does this even mean?
So this was put out by H.E. Harris and Company, and they were sort of dominant in the world of collecting stamps. So they produced, stamp albums, and somehow, were able to purchase large quantities of canceled, used stamps in large quantities, so that they were able to offer these books that they were printed with like the description or whatever, and then there were places in these books where you would apply the stamps with these special little hinges that you kind of gummed rubber things, and so you would buy this thing from them, but a big part of their business was on the sort of approvals model. So if you remember buying records or tapes or whatever back in the 80s or 90s, it was that same kind of thing. Like, well, we give you something cheap to start with, but you got to agree to receive our stuff on a periodic basis, and you can either keep it or send it back, and on all that. So
that's like the Columbia House method, because you say that in the article, and I'm trying to figure out. So the idea is you would get one stamp kit for cheap, but you'd be agreeing to getting stamp kits at a regular price sent, and you could return them, but basically people never did, so that's how they made their money?
That was a big part of their business. They also sold things at like hobby shops, and these kits, I've got some examples of different ways that they were available. These kits, as far as I can tell, were available at like hobby stores or whatever. But there would be then like a coupon to sort of send away for, additional stamps to help you, because you'd get the album, you'd get enough stamps where you go, oh, maybe I could really start collecting these things. And that it was the hook to get you in, to kind of get you to keep coming back to the well to buy their stuff to fill up their album.
Okay, so the stamp collecting album, so the kit, it came with some stamps and an album, but the album was all Star Wars, or it was Star Wars and other stuff? What was it?
The album was sort of space themed stamps from around the world, and then these Star Wars things, they're not really stamps, because they're not postage. So I think they refer to them as seals, because they're like stamps, but they're not actually postage.
Right. Just to be clear, if you put these on a postcard, they wouldn't get anywhere.
It's funny. Now you're bringing this up, there's a great bit of copy in there that does kind of provide some theoretical use for the Star Wars ones. I don't know if you guys saw this. It was in the approval department ad, but it says, prepare for the day where you may be able to send messages to alien planets. When that day arrives, use these 24 full-color Star Wars seals for intergalactic postage and special deliveries to star systems wherever they may be. So they had some purpose.
Well, God damn it! Now thanks to this rigged election, we're never going to get a second term of Trump. We're never going to get Space Force or Space Force Thomas Jefferson. We're never going to get to use these stamps. I don't want to get political, Steve, but we were this close to getting to use these stamps.
And one thing I didn't realize, and I think Jonathan pointed out in here, is that Harris was somehow related to the General Mills Fund Group. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so I guess Harris was like early 20th century, and so by the time of the 70s, he was an older guy, and so yeah, he sold out, and the H.E. Harris brand became part of the General Mills conglomerate. So
Wow.
And I didn't realize that until I found that ad out of a Playthings magazine. It was like, oh, I just didn't realize they were also part of that group. So it made sense, that was their in to kind of get this license.
Yeah. All goes back to the fun group.
Ron, you probably know more about it than I do. I really only have this thing. There's a trade magazine for
Is that the clipping you have?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Playthings is a toy industry magazine, sort of like that Variety's like an entertainment industry magazine. So if you were like in the toy biz, or you were like a buyer for a company that did toys, you'd probably get Playthings as like an industry magazine. I don't know if it's still being published. I can't even remember, but
I'm not sure.
They usually have a lot of interesting ads.
Right.
Because it really sounds like a fake pornographic magazine in a TV show. Like, how they always have like the fake knockoffs on Penthouse or Playboy. Okay, so that was
I'm sorry, I got it wrong. The clipping is from Boy's Life. He has a clipping in there, but you're talking about the big ad with the
big ad,
logo. Yeah. So yeah, they put ads in Playthings because that's where toy buyers would have probably a subscription. So this is like for wholesale buyers rather than for the general public. I think that's the key thing about Playthings, is that it's for a toy buying public, like for the wholesale buying public.
Retailer based, yeah.
So it goes back to General Mills, and at some point I feel like we should probably do some kind of weird corporate study of General Mills in the 70s to figure out how much Star Wars stuff was done all across the world and where, and like what was happening in Holland and Germany, and stamps and cereals, and it's just it seems like it's a huge mess. Did you know, Ron?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know, just probably to recap for people who are listening, but so the General Mills Fund Group, Kenner was one of the companies included in there, along with MPC, who did the model kits.
Right.
And what are the other? Craftmaster, who did various crafts, like they picked up the poster sets after a while. Lionel was in there, and they did the Power Passers slot racing Star Wars set. So there were several different companies that were included. Parker Brothers, I think, was in there, but they didn't get the Star Wars games until later because Kenner kind of kept the board games for a while. But I think we might talk about the General Mills Fund Group in some of the old blog posts about board games or some of the other stuff that we've blogged about. But that's kind of what they were. And until Jonathan did this article, I didn't realize that Harris was also included in there.
And a fun fact, Ron, I did a little bit of research because there's not a lot of Boston connections for Star Wars, right?
I was thinking that you were going to maybe bring this up.
So I figured out where they were actually located. Do you know where they were located, Ron?
Not off the top of my head.
Kenmore Square. So
nice.
There you go, right by Fenway and right by where probably Ron and I must have seen a show at the same time before we knew each other, maybe at the Rathskeller or something, or... that's
probably.
That's sort of like, that used to be, back before money made Boston unlivable and like killed everything that used to be sort of interesting there. Like Kenmore Square was like the place to go.
Paul Weller over there, circa 1993.
Wow. Yeah, let's see. I think it was 92 was when I saw Sam Black Church and Slapshot at the Rathskeller. But that's probably more likely to see to see some bootleg collectors than Ron. But yeah, I mean, that as far as I can tell, that's the only direct Boston connection I can think of in the Kenner era. So, I mean, the vintage era. So let's keep going. We got Johnny too much here, Steve. What do we ask him next? Come on.
We were starting to get into the contents a bit, and now there were multiple versions of the kit too, right, Jonathan?
Yeah. So the first one that came out, they both look pretty much the same on the front, although the sort of racetrack, it's not really a racetrack, but the coloring looks a little different, at least on the pair that I have. But anyways, the first one had a black and white photo on the back of the box, and sort of an earlier version of the seals that didn't really match the version in the kit. And then I mean, I don't know this for sure, but presumably then the later version then is the color version, where the seals actually look appropriate, and they've done a little better job of the design of the back. The contents are the same. It's just a little difference in the packaging.
And it's a TIE fighter chasing an X-wing, just so everyone knows what the image looks like. Like, which of the boring images you've seen 1,000 times is it? I lose track. Like, is it always the TIE fighter chasing the X-wing, or is it sometimes the X-wing I see it so often, I don't even know which direction it usually goes.
Yeah, I feel like there's another one that's often used where it's like, I think the X-wing chasing Darth Vader's TIE fighter and vice versa. There's a couple that rotate around, but this is definitely one of those.
Yeah, because this X-wing is getting it. I mean, it is currently being blown up. It's it's a bad day. And isn't it crazy how orange and rusted the X-wing look? We get the stamp collecting kit, and there's a black and white version, there's a color version, and then you open it up and you get a book, and then you get some stamps, and then you get some seals. Is that it?
Yes. So it's like a paperback book, kind of like a booklet, I would call it. But yeah, it's a that's what you get, and you get these 24 Star Wars seals that are all on this one sheet, and of course it touts that it's $2. So as far as I know, they never sold that sheet, by itself. I think this is just like a value add gimmick. Like, wow, I paid $5 for this thing, and
this one thing alone
is worth $2. I'm ahead of the game already. And then there were 35, again, these sort of space themed postage stamps, and then the little hinges things where you would fold them and kind of get them wet and stick them to the album and to the stamp, so that you could lift up the stamp and still sort of see the thing that was below it, for whatever that's worth. So
and it retailed for about $5, right?
Yeah, about $5. And then
still $5 today.
Money. Right, roughly, I think it's 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
So, and then at some point they offered a bagged version of the thing, and that one's kind of cool. It's got all the same stuff, but it's in a plastic bag with a header card.
Oh, that's very cool.
With the droids on it. Yeah, it's pretty cool looking. That one took me a long time to track down, and I had some help from Duncan Jenkins. I knew he was headed to a fairly recent auction, and that was one of the things described. So he was kind enough to pick that up on my behalf.
No, I don't think I've ever seen that. I've seen the boxed one all over, but I don't think I've ever seen the one with the header card. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I hadn't either.
I thought it was interesting that the Harris name doesn't show up on the header card. So, you can see it through on the packaging, like inside the bag, again, with the $2, stamp sheet showing up there. But so, again, I don't know. I don't have any reason to believe it was packaged by someone else or anything. I think it's just odd that their name isn't on it.
Okay. So Jonathan, if you wanted to put together right now a run of the original black and white kit, the color kit, and then this bagged kit, would it be basically impossible because the bag kit is impossible to find, but it would cost you like $20 if you could find it? Or is there anything valuable about any of this at all?
No. No. It's like low interest. The bagged kit and then the sort of supplemental packs that we'll get into, those are all pretty tough to find. but no one cares about them. So, or very few care about them. So yeah, the box kits, $20 a piece, but this bag thing, it would probably be $30 or maybe $50 at the most. But again, it just,
well, you never know what's going to turn up to be valuable, because 15 years ago I was buying bootleg ceramics and I was like, oh, this stuff isn't worth anything, like $10 a piece. And just last week now on eBay, a ceramic item went for $1,000.
Oh my god!
Ceramic. Wow.
Yeah. And then, oh gosh, yeah. So you never know. Now that there's a blog post, now all it's going to take is a couple of guys to start battling
That's
out
it.
for the bagged stamp collecting kits.
I mean, we're obviously talking about the actual stamps themselves, because that's just going to be a non-stop just roller coaster of joy and fun. So but before we get to that, let's kind of talk more about all the things you could get. There's also a display here. I've never seen the display either. So it holds like 20 different kits. And where would this display probably have been?
This is like, I guess it would have been, it's pretty big, but it's sort of it's a countertop display. So Ian Regan was kind enough to lend the photos and of the display and the box that it came in. So I think it came with like 24 of the earlier, black and white kits in it. So, but it's pretty cool. It's, it's a little bin. All the kits stack up in it, and then it's got a header card in the back, and then the droids are this sort of separate piece that kind of hooks on to the header card, so it's sticking off the side. So it's a a unique looking display. It's pretty cool looking.
I'm just gonna jump in and make one of my famous stupid points, but C-3PO and R2-D2 are just really cool. I really like the way they look together. I think visually they're just really cool looking, aren't they? Right? I mean, we just take it for granted because we collect this stuff all the time. There. But the gold and the blue and the silver and the white and the tall and the short, it's just a very, very nice looking composition. This like goofy kit that you're showing here, it just all comes together with these very cool looking droids.
Yeah, imagine if they weren't there.
Yeah, or if it's just, maybe it's compared to the TIE Fighter and the X-Wing, and I love the design of those as well, but it's just, I don't know, this is a really nice bin. I really like the way they cut out.
The great thing about the store display is the 4 explosions that make it look like it's like a shooting game or something, just like on the header there. Someone's like, oh, we need to punch this up. It's about stamps. It needs more explosions.
Instead of images of the stamps, they just airbrush some explosions on there.
Okay, so we're still not at the point where we're going to talk about the amazing stamps and what's actually on them, because there's even more to collect here, even more to talk about. So if we want to put together a run, well, that display would get pretty crazy, because, getting displays are pretty crazy. What else could we possibly get in this Harris? If we want to be like Johnny Too Much, what else do we have to get?
Well, you've got to track down 6 supplemental packs. Oh. And so these were small shrink-wrapped packs, sort of like a cardboard backer, and each one came with a unique set of a little sheet with 6 more Star Wars seals, and then an additional 10 postage stamps, again, sort of space themed, stamps from around the world. And I haven't, looked at it, but presumably they fill in blanks inside the Star Wars, stamp collecting book. The foreign stamps do. So
okay, so then
those must be pretty rare, or no?
Those are they're pretty tough to find. So there's still one of them that I need sealed. I've got it sort of in an open condition, but they're just, you just never see them. Whereas cool. the main kit you see all the time, but these things they're tough.
And
the other cool thing about them is that that red Star Wars logo is not. Yeah. I don't know if it's used anywhere else.
No, it looks like Flash Gordon. It's not even a Star Wars logo.
What I was just going to bring up. Yeah, I think Jonathan mentions that it's basically similar to that style, the circus poster.
Yeah.
But so it's I think that's where it probably originated, because that was the '78 re-release, and I've seen it. They used it in a lot of ads for movie theaters, but I hadn't seen it used for another product before like that. So that, and then obviously in like bright red, it really stands out. It's really cool.
Yeah, and I can't take credit for spotting that. You know, my reaction was similar to yours. I was like, that's weird. I've never seen that before. And I think I shared it somewhere, I believe, or someone else did. I don't remember, but there was discussion, I think, on that Beyond the Toys group or something. And someone was like, oh yeah, that's like the Style D, except, you know, it's the Wars is, you know, just not extended towards, you know, that's a little more sort of symmetrical, and it's sort of arch-shaped bottom, and this one's not. So, yeah, but I don't think anything else uses that.
Then I think, Steve, we've had our vegetables. We've learned just about everything we can. We now need to start systematically looking at the images and the descriptions, and we're not even going to get to the supplemental ones yet, Steve. Do you know what's my favorite part of the original kit?
Let's see. I gotta pull this up again.
There's only one answer, and I don't even know if you talk about this in your speech, in your essay.
What is it, Sky?
Use your beep code. Okay, so if you look at this sheet of stamps, okay, there's a sheet of stamps, and they're all pretty traditional images of Star Wars characters, and you have Tarkin, which is cool, and Vader, and Jawas, and you have Obi-Wan Kenobi, who appears to, like, just be not having his lightsaber before the effects were, so it's just like a metal rod. But then there's a little runoff space where they just have images of planets, and for some reason, underneath this ghostly image of R2-D2, this is not one of the official seals. It just says, underneath R2-D2, use your beep code. I've never heard a beep code referenced before. I don't, like, what's Jonathan, what does this mean? What is a beep code?
I have no idea. I guess it's for when you're sending these messages to alien planets.
Right.
You know, we're not there yet. We don't have the information.
I mean, I think, you know, we need to make T-shirts of this. You know, I mean, use your beep code. Like, what does that even mean? Like,
it must be the intergalactic postal code.
Yeah.
The beep code.
That's it.
Beep code. That's it.
And who's saying it? Is it R2-D2 who's saying it? Is someone saying it to him? Why is he transparent? Like, why does he get an extra stamp that's not one of the seals? It's okay.
It's bizarre.
So
is it a Force Ghost R2? I don't know.
It's just a hologram. I don't know. It looks more ghostly. I think you're right, Sky. He does look ghostly there.
Okay, so as far as peculiarities off of the original kit, does anything stand out to you, Ron, from peculiarities of the Harris, just the original stamp kit?
I'm still trying to find where the beep code is, but
maybe only some people have seen it. Yeah,
it's like it's on the edge of that sheet, the sheet that came with the thing. I think that's called the gutter.
Oh,
like that extra space around the thing.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
Oh, I see. Use your beep code.
Yeah. That seemed like a very wrong thing to point out. So that's why
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty awesome. I don't know what. I wonder if it's just completely random.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Hey, put something there, Eddie.
Funny,
put what? I don't know. Beep. Use your beep code. Yeah, that's good. That sounds like a start.
Maybe it's like that's Droid for the Force or something. Like use your beep code rather than use the Force.
Yeah.
Sounds more pedestrian though.
Well, I definitely like seeing the pre-effects Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi. I don't know why in their fights they don't have lightsabers that are lit up. That seems weird.
Yeah.
I guess they didn't have access to those photos. I like that instead of an X-Wing fighter, it just says fighter ship.
Yes.
I like that there's a picture of two Jawas, and it just says Chief Jawa. So, which one is the chief? Is that what they're fighting about? Is the guy with the gun the chief? Is that what we're supposed to assume? But where things get really fun and really exciting is with these 6 other sets. This is where things get absolutely bonkers. So first of all, I can't think of many vintage items that are divided this way, So there are 6 different sheets of seals, but they're divided into Death Star, Tatooine, Tatooine Residence, spaceships, cantina scenes, and escape from Death Star. So they're all divided, which makes them kind of fun and kind of neat. So what do we have to say about let's kind of go one by one. Death Star has the stormtrooper in the corridor of light, so I'll have to track that one down.
Gotta find that one.
I can't see if there's anything else funny about that one. Anyone else can speak up on that?
Well, I have a hard time finding the Millennium Falcon on the Millennium Falcon stamp.
Oh my God, you're right. The Millennium Falcon stamp is being dragged into the hangar through the tractor beam, and you can't see the Millennium Falcon at all.
I think for whoever was cropping these photos was drunk. I'm convinced. For both the original stamps and these, it's like, yeah, it's probably off there to the right. We know that, but it's not.
Nah, they're just from Boston.
Yeah, okay.
It has a bit of the tops vibe where something's a little bit off sometimes, but yeah.
And then we have the Tatooine one where we have like the least compelling. Like all these shots are really not compelling. So there's a shot of the purchase of the droids, but it's like the establishing shot where they're like 50 feet away. Then there's another shot of Luke and C-3PO and R2 by the land speeder, but like again they're like 50 feet away. It's basically abstract. Then you have the hero shot of Luke, another picture of Luke looking at R5D4, and then the famous scene with the stormtroopers. I don't know if there's anything else in there that's interesting. Tatooine Residence is an absolute delight. So I'll let someone else.
That might be my favorite.
Yes.
Yeah.
What makes Tatooine Residence so great?
Well, you don't see the spy guy too much, I feel like, in vintage stuff. And then I just noticed there's an image of the Tuscan Raiders kind of peeking over the rock that I'm pretty sure we talked about being replicated in one of those goofy coloring books in the last blog.
Yes, we did.
So it's kind of fun to see that again. I
think that's also used on a 3-pack backdrop, isn't it? I think.
Yes, yeah.
That sounds right. Yeah.
And also we have the Death Star droid, which is really cool because the Death Star droid is on the Tatooine Residence thing because, of course, that's where the Death Star droid is. Everybody knows that. Right. But the name is super confusing. He's like the original Coonface, you know? I'm pretty sure the Jawa picture is just a behind-the-scenes picture where, like, they're just waiting for something to happen, waiting to yell action because it just looks like a tired Tunisian kid in a bathrobe. You've got the Imperial spy, but he's not called Garindin. He's just the spy. And then finally, what do they call the Tuscan Raider?
The Sand Citizen. What else?
What happened? Of all the words they could have chose. This isn't like some language problem.
That is really weird. Yeah, it's like almost like a non-English speaker was trying to do something, and like they somehow came out as Sand Citizen, but that's just a really weird choice of words.
Because
it's one of those things where I had this, and it was like, you know, you get this stuff, and you don't really pay that much attention to it, but it was like one day I was just like, what? Sand Citizen? I mean, okay.
Well,
it's like Borat's subsequent movie film.
Right.
If it had come out later, it sort of reeks of political correctness, right? Like, oh, you can't call them sand people. Oh, I can't? No, call them sand citizens. like it's... So I sort of threatened talking about the etymology of the word citizen versus the word subject. But it is interesting because citizen implies a democracy, right? Because, you know, citizen goes back to like of the city, meaning of the people. Whereas if like you're a subject, you're like underneath some centralized power or whatever. So like this implies a hierarchy to the Tuscan Raider life. That you could be a citizen. Right? Like, the absolute emblems of savagery and lack of laws and craziness, like, they are some of the only citizens in the entire... Because there's no citizens in the Empire, right?
Right.
They're all subjects.
Yep.
So, really, the Sand Citizen is the only truly democratic force in the entire original Star Wars trilogy. Please debate.
Are you saying that Jawas are somehow exempt from democracy or Jawa self-government?
I think so. I mean, what? I don't know. Are there Jawa citizens?
What about people on Bespin? I thought they were defying the Empire until Darth Vader shows up.
Yeah.
I think your view is narrow here.
Yeah. I think, they do call them citizens of Bespin, don't they?
I don't know. They might.
Okay. Well, please insert disc 2 for a continuation of this conversation.
Yeah.
But that's great because it's also just like Johnny Too Much says in the write up that it's just poorly cropped. It's like, how do you cut off the top of the head of the Tuscan Raider? Like, you have one job.
They needed to get those rocks by his feet in.
Yeah.
It was essential.
And there are sand people on the same sheet. So it must have been that they were like, "What?
What do you? You didn't want to use sand person. They had to.
I'm going to go with Ron's explanation that they're just stupid Bostonians. It was like, "Hey, Johnny, what's the singular of people? Fucking citizen? All right, sand citizen. You know, just like."
It could have said Sand Yastrzemski or something. Yes. That would have been worse.
Okay, and then we get to spaceships, 2 different words, and this has a good Y-wing image that you don't usually see from behind. You have the X-wing, you have a Millennium Falcon, which you can actually see, a TIE fighter, and the escape pod. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. There's not too much escape pod merch out there, so that's another.
And I know because
one.
I tried to track it all down.
Yeah.
And the cantina scenes is just great. They've come up with a new name. What is the new name?
Well, that's Gatorhead for our friendly Hammerhead. Another just where did that come from?
I mean, when did these come out? I guess they could have come out before the 20 backs came out. So
this was set. Yeah, the Playthings ad I think is from early '78, and it's touted as a new product for '78, but it was probably out.
Just didn't have a name yet.
Early.
To give them credit though, they're consistent with the names they choose. I noticed that they refer to him as Gatorhead in one of the ads as well, like for these, and it might have been the one where you can get the whole set for what was it, $2. They mention Gatorhead again, so it's
they were sticking with it.
They're sticking with it.
I might be ignorant on this, but is that? We'd have to ask someone who's into props and cantina stuff, like Tom Spina or something. Was Gatorhead ever a name that was attached to that mask early on? Where did they even get that?
I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah.
I think the mask was called Woof.
Right.
And so on some early Kenner stuff, it'll be called Woof.
Yeah.
Before they came up with Klaatu. But I just don't even know where Gatorhead comes from. It seems like just really random.
I don't know. I'm leaning more towards the drunk Bostonian saying, "Hey, call him Gatorhead."
Hey, Doyle, come over here. What does this guy look like to you? I was like, a gate or something? All right, we'll call him Gatorhead.
That's probably exactly what happened.
Yeah, I think that's.
I love that no less than half of the stamps on this sheet are Cantina patrons. It's like whatever,
Well, Steve does his whole show about talking to people about their movie experiences, and whenever he gets around to talking to my brothers who are in Boston and seeing Star Wars whenever they could in the Boston area. They went, my brother Bart, he went for the cantina. I mean, that's why, he would go and see Star Wars 500 times, but it was primarily to see the cantina. So it is really cool to have this much cantina featured. I mean, you have some aliens here that you just never see, right?
Yep.
I mean, there's one that I guess I'm not a very good Star Wars fan. I don't think I know the name of all the aliens in there. It is something else, and then we end with the sixth sheet, which is Escape from the Death Star, and has a return of our two favorite characters, Steve.
Yes, that's right. The Space Force Thomas Jefferson just makes it in there.
Yes.
Along with
That's kind of
along with Steve Jobs.
That's like a flipped version of that poster
It is.
puzzle.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you want to have a Space Force Thomas Jefferson focus, there are two pieces now.
Yeah.
There are two items.
And I like how too much he puts on this whole idea that they had to trademark everything.
Oh, right.
They didn't know.
Right.
So they have an X-Wing, but they just call it a fighter ship, and then they trademark it.
Right.
And here it just says, Heroes.
Heroes trademark.
Hey, Doyle, what do we call these? Heroes? What is that, some kind of fighter ship? It's called a fighter ship. Who cares? Oh, my God. Wow. Well, that is super awesome. I think we've gotten our too much here.
I don't know that there's any more too much to be had. I think we've reached the end.